Good morning, everybody. We are back in the beautiful borough of Queens, here at Queens Borough Hall. I want you to see this banner behind me. Absolutely beautiful. A new banner in our series of banners celebrating New York City, the joy, the beauty, the energy, the excitement here in the borough of Queens. It's a celebration of our recovery and our comeback, and it's happening big time here in Queens. And a lot of why we are coming back so strong is because of the help we have gotten from the White House, from the federal government. I had the honor of joining with our First Lady and with the governor to greet President Biden when he landed in Queens yesterday at JFK. And I told the president how much we all appreciate everything he's doing for us. The investments that he has made are the reason that we are recovering. And this week, what he'll be doing with the United Nations General Assembly, leading the way in the fight, not only against COVID, but the fight against climate change. President Biden is leading the whole world in the fight against COVID and the fight against climate change. This is a pivotal week for our time, for our generation, as we see our president really move the whole world to unity in the fight against climate change. We're going to need it because this is now, as we start to leave the COVID era, this is going to be the existential crisis, the crucial battle that we all have to fight shoulder to shoulder. And in that vein, really good news this week for New York City. In the State of the City at the beginning of the year, I said we had to seize the opportunity, focus on renewable energy, ensure that New York City became a renewable energy city, cut our dependence on fossil fuels once and for all. That began with our city government turning to all renewable energy for everything we do. And today I can tell you we've reached a landmark agreement that's going to make a huge difference. And this will connect New York City to hydropower, to wind power, to solar energy, from Canada and from upstate New York. This is massive. This is a big deal, something we've been working on for years that has finally come to fruition. This means a greener future for New York City. And specifically by the investments we're making in these green infrastructure efforts. And New York City leading the way, saying this city will put our money where our mouth is in favor of renewable energy. I can tell you that by 2025, all New York City government will be powered with 100% renewable electricity, all of it. That is how we change things. And we're going to make sure for the whole city that we increasingly replace fossil fuel electricity with renewable electricity. It's part of the bigger effort that we're undertaking, including the historic effort to end the practice of fossil fuel connections by 2030. All of these efforts together move us aggressively to a greener world. Now, we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions if we're going to survive. The actions that we're announcing today will be the equivalent of taking 1 million cars off the road, just to give you the sheer magnitude of how much greener and safer this will make us. By turning aggressively to renewable power, it is the equivalent of taking 1 million cars off the road, and more to come. And the beauty of this is we get a cleaner energy supply, a more reliable energy supply, and create thousands of good union jobs in the process. This is the way of the future. This is a transformative moment. I want to say it was great working with Governor Hochul together and her team on this. It was great working with Hydro-Quebec. To find common ground so we could get this renewable power, a really great example of cooperation in the face of a global crisis. I want you to hear how important this is for New York City and for the world that this major step forward is happening. First, someone who has been leading the way in the city, in the state, fighting for a greener future. And I want to thank her and everyone that is a part of the League of Conservation Voters. They have been absolutely steadfast for years, helping to move us in the right direction. The president of the New York League of Conservation Voters, Julie Tai.
Mayor, thank you so much. It's I'm so glad to be here in the middle of Climate Week. When Indian Point closed, the power supporting New York City turned to more fossil fuels, creating a challenge for New York City's efforts to reduce emissions 80% by 2050 under One NYC and under your leadership. And as a result, the carbon intensity of the grid increased. And while the state had set these goals under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of getting 70% renewable energy by 2030 and 100% clean energy by 2040, it doesn't tell us where the power has to go or when. So right now, only about 28% of all our power in New York is from renewables. The overwhelming majority of it is from hydropower. But the downstate grid is much dirtier than the upstate grid, which means that more of our power, roughly 3/4, comes from polluting fossil fuel plants. And those are primarily in disadvantaged communities and communities of color. So to meet our climate goals and slash air pollution, we need more solar, including rooftop solar. We need more wind. We need offshore wind. We need battery storage. We need more hydro. We need energy efficiency. We need the federal government and Congress to approve Build Back Better so we make this all turn into a reality. But we also need transmission lines because New York City is so limited by the built environment on how much renewable energy we can generate. So we have to bring clean energy in. That's why we're so excited that Governor Hochul approved 2 historic transmission projects to bring clean energy to New York City. These projects are another tool in our toolbox for fighting the climate crisis that will accelerate the transition to clean energy, something that we and our partners in labor and within the environmental movement have been advocating for. The 2 projects that are been approved yesterday will bring enough power to replace the power from Indian Point, enough to power 2.5 million homes, avoid 77 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions over a period of time, and critically, it's going to reduce our reliance on dirty plants in neighborhoods overburdened by pollution and improve public health. So kudos to you, Mayor de Blasio in New York City, for committing to power all New York City operations by renewable electricity. Your commitment was key to approval of these historic projects. So thank you for putting your money where your mouth is and helping to make clean energy goals a reality. We hope Congress will do the same later this year. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Really appreciate the point about putting our money where our mouth is, because we knew New York City had to step up and make a huge investment to ensure that the state would move forward, Hydro-Quebec would move forward. We had to lead by example, put that money forward. This is going to be some of the best money we ever spent in the name of the people in New York City, because it's literally going to help us avoid the existential crisis that's facing us. So thank you. Thank you for your support, and thank you for everything you and your colleagues have done to help get us to this day. Everybody, I want you to hear from another voice, truly global voice. He's someone I've gotten to know over the years who has been a conscience, whose ideas are noted and acted on all over the world, whether it's at the United Nations or the Vatican, wherever you go. Professor Jeffrey Sachs has been one of the people showing us what we need to do on climate change and being uncompromising in a way that has reminded everyone just how severe the threat is. We were together at the Vatican with Pope Francis several years ago, a really powerful gathering to address the climate crisis. And I remember Jeffrey Sachs said to people at that gathering, we have to be clear and blunt. We have to strand fossil fuels in the ground because they are a danger to us. We have to ensure we move aggressively to renewable power. Today is an example of doing that. And I want you to hear from him, one of the great international voices for change, Professor Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University.
Mr. Mayor, we're here to celebrate with you and to thank you. This is incredible leadership. This is a huge, huge deal. You ran on this in 2013. You have been governing on this principle since the first day as mayor. And when I was lucky to join your sustainability advisory board, we talked about these projects from the start. They're complicated. They took time to elaborate, to diagnose, to analyze, and to negotiate. You've done it. This is a huge deal. New York is going all clean, all green. New York City is going all electric. And these new initiatives announced today and approved by Governor Hochul are going to make a tremendous difference. As you pointed out, not only is this the way to climate safety, it is the way to public health. And I want to underscore one other point. It is the way to competitiveness of New York City. Businesses are going to be looking for clean, safe, zero carbon places for their futures. They're demanding that. New York City is going to be providing not only the normal intellectual and cultural leadership, but it's going to be providing the competitive environment for a completely zero carbon green future. It's fitting, Mr. Mayor, that as we're speaking, President Biden is making exactly at these moments his address at the UN General Assembly. And just moments before your press conference, the Secretary General of the UN called on the whole world to go to zero. And New York City, I think you can say this is, you stepped up the first place in the entire world after the Secretary General made his call this morning. So the timing could not be better. We're so proud of you and so proud of this accomplishment. It's going to be a tremendous contribution to New York City's future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Thank you for all you have done to help us to achieve this and for showing people it could be done. Sometimes it takes a voice who says, hey, you know what, we can do something very different. You've been that voice so often, and I'm glad we're celebrating today with the Secretary General, with the President of the United States, big, big changes. And now I want to hear from one more person who has been an extraordinary advocate for the changes we need to address climate change. Way, way ahead of the curve in terms of the work in this city he's done. He is chair of the Environmental Protection Committee in the City Council, and he was, years ago in that same role, one of the people who said that we needed to do things very differently, and his leadership is one of the reasons why we are able to do things differently. My pleasure to introduce Council Member Jim Gennaro.
Thank you, Mayor Blasio. It's a great team. I certainly wish to be associated with the remarks of Julie and Jeff. Everything I was going to say, they pretty much said. So let me just kind of like wing it here. And when you talk about people making investments and getting this all together, I think it's really important to stress here that the reason why the president, the reason why the governor, the reason why the private sector, the reason why the EJ community, the reason why the unions, all wanted to come together is because of your leadership. You and your team are the hub. This is what made it happen. And so when you show that you have the ability to move the city forward in a very aggressive way and be a model for the world, people are going to follow. And that is what happened here. For you to create this tapestry of collaboration, I think it's a real testament to you and your great team. I just want to expand a little bit on what Jeff said regarding public health. Once one reduces greenhouse gases by X or whatever it is, the criteria pollutants that are regulated by the Clean Air Act also come down by the same amount. So this is great for the planet, but very great. This is really terrific for local air quality. Sometimes people forget that, but that is critically important. But let me end where I began, which is thanking you, Mr. Mayor, for your leadership. You and your great team. You're the one that made this all happen, and all New Yorkers owe you a real debt of gratitude today. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here on this very special day.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Council Member. I know it's a really special day for you. You've been at this so long, and a day for us all to celebrate. Thank you very much, my friend.
You bet.
Well, everyone talking about a green city and a green planet, let's talk about green spaces for our kids, for our families, for our seniors right here in the borough of Queens. This week, Parks Department, which has done an outstanding job creating new green spaces, better green spaces all over Queens, all over the city, cuts the ribbon on a brand new space, the Kharibdus playground in Astoria Park. This is wonderful. It is a $12 million renovation to one of the most popular playgrounds in all of Queens. Kids are going to love this. And for so many hardworking families in Astoria and surrounding neighborhoods, this is going to be another step in the right direction. So these kind of investments make a huge difference. And that's one step forward for Queens. But here comes another one. This week, we'll be establishing a park on what was underused land that was sitting there that people couldn't take advantage of, couldn't enjoy. Now we're going to turn it into a beautiful park. We'll be establishing the Gwen Eiffel Park in Jamaica, Queens. It was formerly called Railroad Park. It was undeveloped. It was inaccessible. We're putting a $21 million investment in to create a new park in a big residential neighborhood that needs places for people to enjoy, to be outside, to be safe, to be in the presence of nature. More open space is the way forward. And Gwen Ifill, an extraordinary journalist, a trailblazing journalist who showed us the way to exhibit truth, understanding, integrity. She also was a proud daughter of Southeast Queens, another one of the great New Yorkers who contributed not only to the city but to the national discourse. So fitting that we are naming this park after Southeast Queens' own Gwen Ifill. I want to hear about how important this is from one of the people who made this happen, his strong voice. It was Councilmember Danique Miller and Reverend Phil Craig who said to me, this is something that needs to be fixed while we're still in office. This is a wrong that needs to be righted for the community. We put our minds together, even in the midst of pandemic. We found a way to do it. Really want to thank you, Councilmember, for leading the way. We welcome Councilmember Danique Miller.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio. Thank you so very much. First of all, for hearing us, for coming out and really, as you said, in the midst of a pandemic and moment of crisis. I think we were out for other reasons, assessing the community, and happened to just scan by Railroad Park, and certainly Reverend Craig was instrumental in saying that this had to be developed, but really going in and taking a look at what we have seen for years be undeveloped. But the interesting thing about that, we were receiving calls and letters and emails over the years from local residents looking to utilize this unutilized space, green space, and our what we've learned over the past 18 months during the pandemic, how important green space was to us, our proximity to JFK Airport, how important green space is to us, and all the things that you mentioned earlier and that the other panelists mentioned about how do we sustain our environment. And so we are so appreciative of the $21 million investment that has here that will go a really long way. Last week when we had a scoping meeting, we had nearly I think we got we had about a week to put it together, and we had nearly 100 residents on the scoping meeting, really exchanging ideas, talking about what they would like to see in the park, and things like walking trails and pollinated gardens that really fit the serene atmosphere of the local community, because it sits kind of right in the midst of single family homes. But it's about 12 acres, and it's so important that we develop this land, especially right about now. Again, I want to thank Reverend Phil Craig for his tireless advocacy on behalf of this space and making sure that this moment came to fruition. Really looking forward to the work that is being done, and appreciate the investment that has been that has occurred over the last 2 years here in Southeast Queens. Obviously, we still endure some of the highest asthma rates in the city. Obviously, green space is as important now as ever. But over the last 2 years, with the investment in Detective Keith Williams Park and the investment at Southern Queens Park, Roy Wilkins Park, we will be spending over $130 million in parks and green space right here in the 27th Council District, right here in Southeast Queens. So we are very, very thankful and appreciative of that. We're looking forward to working with you, your team, and Parks Department and others to really put together something really exciting, sustainable for generations to come with this green space. Also, just want to reiterate what you said about our famed Southeast Queens journalist, Gwen Ifill, and what she has meant to our community, but what she meant to the national discourse in terms of politics and the integrity that she performed her job in up until her transition in 2016. So I thank you so much. Look forward to working with you and your team. The community is excited. We look forward to the next scoping and meeting around discourse and dialogue that really puts together an exciting green space for the community to enjoy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. I can tell the passion you feel for this amazing new park. It's going to be great for the community. Thank you. Now, everyone, we're making the investments in parks, we're making the investments in clean, renewable energy, but we're also making investments in our young people. Queens Week, City Hall in your borough this week, we are celebrating so many ways that we're helping the comeback in New York City, a recovery in New York City, but also taking us to a better place. We've said from the very beginning, a recovery for all of us. It means surpassing where we were pre-pandemic, doing things differently. And today I saw that commitment in action at PS 377 in Jamaica. This was amazing. Joined a first grade class along with the literacy coach who's working with the teachers. She's one of over 425 literacy coaches at elementary schools across the city. This is a new initiative on a huge scale, so huge that we're making it universal. We call it Literacy for All. I need people to understand why this is so important, because in this city and cities all over the country, for years and years, we tried to get more and more kids reading by third grade level. That's the crucial break point. If your kids are reading on grade level by third grade, they are predicted, according to so much research, to do well going forward. If not, many, many challenges. We need to get every kid reading on grade level by third grade. To do it, we built a foundation with pre-K for all, and now 3K for all, which is well on the path to being totally universal in this city. But we had to go farther. The baby bonds that we're giving kids in kindergarten now, another amazing innovation. This city leading the way. Baby bonds for every child in New York City in kindergarten this year, saying they do have a very bright future, including going to college if that's what works for them. The resources will be there. But we need to add all these pieces together into a literacy blitz. 3K, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, nonstop focus on literacy to get our kids ready for third grade. We're making a huge investment, hundreds of millions of dollars, to do something that no city has attempted in New York City before on a large scale. Literally reaching every child. We're flooding classrooms with new books, so there's plenty of books for every child. We're doing universal literacy screening to make sure that we know exactly what each child needs, identifying specific areas of strength and weakness, identifying how we can help them individually, looking for challenges like dyslexia, which is a big issue that can be addressed if it's identified early enough. We are going to do something revolutionary with a focus on literacy like never before, reaching every child. And when these kids get to third grade, it's going to be a whole new ballgame in this city, because the ability of these children to succeed in life will be intensified so greatly. Honestly, before, the city never dared to set this goal in so aggressive a manner. But because of the success of 3K and pre-K, because we got resources from the federal government, because the state legislature stood up and said, yes, you deserve the Campaign for Fiscal Equity resources, because we have an opportunity moment, we're forging ahead with the biggest effort to achieve literacy in the history of New York City. And these next few years are going to be crucial, extraordinarily exciting. I want to thank our Chancellor, Misha Ross Porter, who saw this opportunity and believed we should grab it now. She's 100% right, and we'll be giving you regular updates on that. Now, that's crucial news for our future, but I want to give you some other big news that just came in now. And this is news that is breaking this morning, but what a vote of confidence in New York City. What a statement about the future of our economy and jobs for New Yorkers, and good paying jobs. I want to commend the folks at Google. They've made a decision, a momentous decision. Google is buying new office space in New York City on a vast level, a $2.1 billion investment, the biggest office building sale in all of the United States of America since the pandemic began, the single biggest sale, 1.3 million square feet for technology and innovation. Google is leading the way here in our economic comeback, but also further asserting what we know more and more. New York City is now one of the great tech capitals of the world. And when you look at Google alone, just a few years ago, 2018, they had 7,000 workers in New York City, now over 12,000. Why? Because we have an extraordinary talent pool, because we have every kind of person here, the most diverse community in the world. And Google values that because they want to reach the young and up-and-coming talent that wants to live here and wants to work here. Really want to thank Google for this decision. I want you to hear from one of the people who made it happen and who will be leading the way on this. He is the Vice President for Global Client and Agency Solutions and the New York City site lead for this new initiative. My great pleasure to introduce Torrance Boone.
Thank you so much, Mayor de Blasio. It's great to be here. And thank you for all that you've done for the city during COVID over the past 8 years. We, as you mentioned, are excited to announce our purchase of St. John's Terminal and deepening our commitment to New York over the long haul. As you also mentioned, when Google first came to New York about 20 years ago, we started with one employee working out of a Starbucks on 86th Street. And since then, we've grown to over 12,000 Googlers here. And that makes New York our largest office outside of the Bay Area. And it's no secret that Google's success here is reliant on New York's energy, creativity, world-class talent. As you mentioned, it's what keeps us rooted here. And it's what will continue our commitment over the long haul. When it opens in 2023, the renovated St. John's Terminal building will anchor our new campus here in Hudson Square, and it's being designed as a highly sustainable and adaptable building that will reconnect Hudson Square to the waterfront. The building will also offset 100% of its carbon and help Google advance its commitment to operate 24/7 carbon-free energy by 2023. And as Google moves toward a more flexible hybrid approach to work, we know that continuing to invest in spaces where our employees can come together and collaborate is critical to doing their best work, and that's going to remain an important part of our future and our ability to grow. It's fitting as we've started reopening our doors here to let Googlers back into the New York office on a voluntary basis. That's where I am right now. That we can also announce this fantastic news about St. John's Terminal. So we're reaffirming our commitment to the city. Thank you again for having me and letting me share this exciting news.
Torrance, thank you so much. It's a really, really big deal for New York City. And this is one of the shots in the arm we need as part of our comeback. So I want to thank you. This is something that really sends a message, not only Google's own decision to do this on such a vast scale, sends a message to the larger tech community, sends a message to the larger business community all over the country, all over the world. This is the place to be. So what you guys have done today means so much to all of us. Deep, deep appreciation, and we look forward to working with you as you build out this really exciting space going forward.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
All right, we talked about a lot of things that we're moving forward, a lot of ways we're addressing challenges. We've got another big challenge that we're working on nonstop. I've been on calls, nonstop meetings to get this issue addressed. It's the challenge we're having on Rikers Island. And there are solutions. It is a bad situation that must be addressed very, very aggressively, and it is being addressed aggressively. I want to go over some of the things that we're doing today, and you're going to hear from Dr. Mitch Katz in a moment on the way that the healthcare team, their correctional health, which does extraordinary work, how they're addressing some of the challenges as well. We know that because of COVID, a series of problems were set in motion. We have to turn each and every one of them around. That's our responsibility. That's my responsibility. We understand none of us asked for COVID, but we still have to find a way to dig out of each and every one of these challenges. One of the big challenges has been in intake. And that situation is being changed immediately because it was not acceptable what was going on. It is not going to continue. It is being changed right as we speak. Yesterday, new intake spaces were opened at Rikers, 2 clinics and an additional housing unit. Everyone must go through intake in less than 24 hours. The faster the better, but certainly less than 24 hours. That is the commitment from Commissioner Schiraldi and his team. We're giving every resource needed to address this situation. It will be fixed. At the core of this issue, understanding that COVID set the pieces in motion, but now, as we start to fight our way out of COVID, the key is staffing. We're creating relief by bringing in additional staffing with help from NYPD, private staffing, whatever it takes. We will put the resources forward to bring additional staffing in to relieve the situation. We're helping to address some of the very real concerns our officers have, and I want to affirm the vast majority of our officers at Rikers Island work very, very hard, do the right thing for their fellow officers, for everyone incarcerated there. They are the people I want to honor right now and thank. It's a tough job, and they do it well. But those who have not been showing up for work, not because they're sick, just because they are not showing up for work, just because they choose to, they do a massive disservice to their fellow officers and to the people in New York City. And we're certainly not going to tolerate that. If we don't have sufficient staffing, we can't solve the problem. So we've been very, very clear, and we have cracked down on fake sick calls. We're not going to accept them. We've made it very clear that anyone who calls in sick and isn't really sick will be suspended, will lose pay. And that message is spreading, and more people are coming back to work as they should. It's only the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to do for their fellow officers. But unfortunately, so many good, hard-working officers are being let down, not only by those who stay out sick falsely, but by their own union as well. COBA, the union that represents the correction officers, has been, unfortunately, one of the reasons why this crisis has become so exacerbated. We have seen too many times that they have not addressed the situation as they are required to by law. Under state law, a union has to do the right thing for the people of this city by making sure that people show up for work and not discouraging people from doing their job. The legal action the city has filed makes very clear. And it's directed not at the individual members of the union. It is directed at the leadership of the union because they're the ones who have been causing so much of the problem. And the message is clear. The union leadership must stop engaging in, causing, instigating, encouraging, or condoning any mass absenteeism, concerted stoppage of work, or slowdown. This is just common sense. If the workers aren't there, everyone is made less safe. The union should be leading the way with the city, saying, everyone get back to work, do your job, help each other. Instead, the union's done the opposite. So our legal action's clear. We're calling upon COBA to meet their legal obligation, to work with the city to get everyone to come to work, to ensure that everyone is safe and not put their officers at risk by encouraging people to stay out. It's about safety for everyone in Rikers, those who are incarcerated, those who work there, everyone. Now, I want to be very clear. There's a solution to this. We are not looking for penalties. That's not our ultimate goal. Our only goal is to get COBA to join with the city to encourage everyone back to work and actually act as partners for the good of all. That's what the law says they're supposed to do. That's what they need to do. Meantime, we're addressing every issue. As we find an issue, we find a solution, we apply the resources rapidly. That's what we have to do right now, and I want to talk about the health situation. We obviously have 1.5 years of experience at Rikers addressing COVID. Correctional Health really look at the facts, has done an outstanding job addressing COVID. When you look at Rikers and our city jail system compared to prison systems around this country, Correctional Health did outstanding work in ensuring that COVID was limited in our city jails, and they're doing that work still. It's made harder by not having enough staffing from correction officers. It's made harder by a court system that's not hearing cases, and therefore people waiting in Rikers, inmates waiting for 1 year or more for their trial. We need to move on all these fronts, but in the meantime, Correctional Health continues to do everything, and I've said to Dr. Mitch Katz, as the head of Health and Hospitals, which includes Correctional Health, whatever resources he needs, whatever additional security, he will have it so his healthcare professionals can attend to the situation, keep people safe. I want you to hear directly from Dr. Katz the latest on the situation on Rikers and what's being done to address it by the folks that we really depend on in Correctional Health. Dr. Katz.
Yes, thank you, sir, and thank you for taking such dramatic action to improve conditions at Rikers. I can tell you that right now at our clinics, there are a large number of correction officers to ensure that we can take care of all the inmates and meet all of their health needs in a safe way for my staff as well as for the inmates themselves. As you said, sir, while so many jail and prison systems across the country had major outbreaks of COVID last year. We did not. And that's because the brave correctional health service people who work for health and hospitals did their job, even when we didn't have sufficient PPE, even when we had no testing. They courageously cared for people. They did the testing when we did have testing. They were able to cohort the different inmates who came in at different times, and were able to keep the level of COVID at the jail actually lower than the community levels of COVID here in New York. We have had a setback over the last few weeks, as you have been very frank about discussing, because without enough staff, enough correctional officers, people then stay too long in intake. And when they stay too long in intake, it provides an environment where COVID can be transmitted. But thanks to your actions and the incredible new commissioner, the Department of Corrections, we've been able to open up a new intake area, which is larger, it's safer, it allows appropriate social distancing, and we are able now to take care of people and to keep them safe. And you will see, sir, that the numbers, the percent of people with COVID will go down again as it used to be, now that we've been able, thanks to your efforts, to achieve a safer Rikers. Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously, Dr. Katz, we have a lot more to do, and this is not going to all change overnight, but I want you to know, and I want all New Yorkers to know, we are going to put every effort, every resource into fixing this situation. As tough a hand as everyone's been dealt, it can be fixed, it will be fixed, period. So thank you, Dr. Katz, to you and your whole team for everything you're doing. Now, everyone, let's talk about what we do every day, our indicators. And the first one, again, always makes me happy. The doses administered to date, great number, growing steadily, especially because of our mandates and incentives, 11,258,785 doses from day one. Extraordinary number. And more to come, as we're about to hopefully very, very soon be able to reach 5 to 11-year-old kids and do boosters for older New Yorkers and others in need. Number two, daily number of people admitted to New York City hospitals for suspected COVID-19. Today's report, 112 patients. Confirmed positivity, 25.41%. Hospitalization rate. Today's number is 1.1 per 100,000. So that's really good news. And the new reported cases on a 7-day average. Today's report, 1,551 cases. Few words in Spanish. And it's obviously Climate Week, such an important week for the city, for the nation, for the world. And we're celebrating some really big victories for New York City. Esta semana del clima. Estamos conectando la ciudad de Nueva York con la energía hidroeléctrica, solar y de viento del Canadá y el norte del estado de Nueva York. Estos proyectos de energía verde crearán empleos y un suministro de energía más confiable. Así es como luchamos contra el cambio climático. With that, let's turn to our colleagues in the media, and please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
We'll now begin our Q&A. As a reminder, today we're joined by Dr. Dave Chokshi, Dr. Mitch Katz, Chancellor Misha Porter, Ben Furness, Mayor's Office of Climate and Sustainability Director, Vincent Schiraldi, DOC Commissioner, and Marco Soler, the Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. And with that, we'll go to our first question from Andrew from WNBC.
Good morning, everyone on the call. Mayor, you spent a lot of time talking about climate change this morning. There are a few dozen families in Queens 3 weeks after Hurricane Ida who today say they feel like they've already been forgotten, even though it's only been 3 weeks. What is your message to people who are still cleaning up the storm damage, still filling out applications, and still wondering how they're going to make ends meet about when they'll see relief and your assurance that they haven't been forgotten?
No, they have not been forgotten. We, Andrew, I want you to make sure you please give any information you have, any names of families and how to reach them. We'll send people right out today. We have been doing nonstop canvassing of the most affected areas. Folks going door to door, from our public engagement unit, asking people whatever they need, working with community groups we put under contract like we did in the census in multiple languages. I can tell you some facts that are powerful. Tens of thousands of doors have been knocked on, direct conversations, making sure people get help. 31,000 FEMA applications have been filled out, and we're working with the families to make sure those checks come quickly. Those checks are already starting to move, which is fantastic. Anyone who needs food, we've offered it. Hotels, we've offered it. Actually, very few people have taken us up on food. Excuse me, on hotels. We've had a decent amount of food distribution, but very few people have taken us up on hotels. Sanitation department, stunning effort to pick up the debris. That's almost completed now. Also, our city cleanup corps has gone and helped people get debris out of their homes as needed. No, it's a massive effort. It continues. It will continue as long as needed. So any family in any circumstance, regardless of documentation status, regardless of language, whatever they need, we're going to stick with them until they get it. Go ahead, Andrew.
Another topic, you mentioned Google's acquisition of St. John's Terminal, largest acquisition of a building like that, and your tone was celebratory. So can you explain to New Yorkers why it is that Amazon's attempt to expand in New York was bad, but Google's attempt to expand in New York is good?
Andrew, I'm going to ask you to remember your history, my friend.
Oh, I remember.
No, I'm going to make it clear. We worked to get a fair deal from Amazon. We thought we had a fair deal with Amazon. They said yes, and then they walked away. And what I have said very bluntly ever since was they wronged the people in New York City by doing that. But you know what's happened in the meantime is so much of the tech community has continued to invest in New York City on a vast scale. Really, really striking how much more of a tech capital we've become. As you heard, this is the single biggest building transaction in the United States of America since the pandemic. And I think it really sends a statement about the deepening tech community. Right now is about 350,000 jobs in New York City. That's going to grow substantially. So again, what Google has done sends a message to everyone else that this is the place to be for the whole tech community and for the larger business world.
Next, we have Ari from New York One.
Morning. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah, Ari, how you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Doing good, thank you.
I wanted to ask a couple questions about the coming report from the Extreme Weather Task Force you convened in the wake of Hurricane Ida. That report, I think you said, is supposed to come on or before September 26th. It is the last months of your administration. How can you ensure that the findings and recommendations in the report become institutionalized, legally enforceable very quickly? Are there legislative plans that are coming with that report?
It's a really important question. I thank you. I'll be getting the final report this weekend. We'll make it public on Monday. I've got an initial briefing. It's very powerful in my view. There's a lot we can do now. Now, you're right, Ari, to say some of the things we need would be from the federal government, particularly the infrastructure support, the resources. Some of what we need is from the state government. There's definitely help we need in terms of addressing some laws, et cetera. But we can do a lot nonetheless. And what I think the report will point out is the areas where the city can make some investments that will make a big difference. Changing strategies for projecting and addressing extreme weather. This piece, we're going to definitely need help from the federal government in terms of the projection side because we are not getting the flow of information we ideally need. But we, as we've already made clear, are going to lean in more on things like travel bans and evacuations as needed. But there are actually a number of things that we can start now and get going that the city can continue on. To ultimately solve it, again, big federal and state role, but I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing from the report so far. I think there's a lot we can get done. Go ahead, Ari.
Thank you for that. And additionally, on this question of responding to Ida, and particularly on green infrastructure and flood protection infrastructure, the city got $15 billion in post-Sandy recovery funds, I think a little more than that by now. 2 years ago, a report from the Comptroller's Office found that the city had spent just a little over half of those funds. How much more has the city spent since then? Where's the total funding, total spending amount proportion at? And will the post-Ida report include plans to quickly spend the money that remains on infrastructure upgrades and emergency preparedness?
I think it's a very fair question to look at what we have learned from Ida and that kind of extreme weather versus what we learned from Sandy, a different kind of extreme weather, but they're all extreme weather, there's no question. I'm going to see in a second if Ben Furness, who's on the line, our sustainability director, has some of the updates on the spending so far. I know his colleague Janie Bavishi handles that area first and foremost in terms of resiliency, but Ben may have something to offer on that topic. But here's what I'd say. We'll get you the latest on the spending. I'm very satisfied that it is an entirely different reality now in this city compared to before Sandy. So if we're talking about defense, coastal defense, a lot is already done. A lot is advanced in terms of construction or plans that are being activated. Some of it depends on Army Corps of Engineers. They've generally been good partners. But I feel like the pacing has been very strong given the magnitude of what has to happen and the complexity. But we'll get you an update on where that stands. This report on Ida, I think, is going to focus more on the newer kinds of challenges, particularly from rain. Again, the coastal flooding is an area where there's been a lot of attention now for quite a few years. The new challenge of rain and flooding is what this report will focus on, and new approaches we can take, which I think will help in coastal areas and inland areas as well. But the more we've looked at the sheer numbers of what happened with Ida, just an extraordinary, shocking amount of rain fell. And that changes the whole ballgame for us of what we have to prepare for. So that's going to be the core of this report. Ben, anything you want to note on how much of the spending has happened so far?
We can work with Janie to get the latest numbers, but obviously all the extreme weather we've been seeing is just a really sobering reminder about how important it is to be decarbonizing and shifting away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible and doing our part to reduce the impacts of climate change. So.
Amen. Well, and I'll just follow that through. I mean, we can do all the mitigation in the world, and as we've talked about, we could try and redo our entire sewer system, which would cost, a massive, massive amount of money. But the very best thing we should be doing is going for the root cause and reducing our reliance on fossil fuels radically, quickly. That's the best way to address extreme weather once and for all.
Next, we have Peter from CBS Radio.
Peter, are you there?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Peter, how you doing today?
Good, thanks. First question about Rikers. How many cops do you foresee sending there? How many private contractors? And should people be concerned those cops will then not be on the street?
Peter, initially, we're talking about 100 officers to work in the courts, actually. Right now, the NYPD handles the arraignment process in Brooklyn courts. We're going to emulate that in some of the other court systems. So the cops will not be going to Rikers per se. What they'll be doing is working in the courts, and that will free up the correction officers to go back and do other work at Rikers. As you noted, we're going to bring in private security as well. We'll get all those numbers. They're still shaping up, but it's going to provide a lot of relief and a lot of ability for Commissioner Schiraldi to get officers where he needs them most to speed things up in Rikers and improve the conditions. 100 cops, every officer matters for sure. We are talking about a force of 35,000. We'll use overtime as necessary to help ensure that we can get the most done with minimal impact on other work the NYPD is doing. So I think what you've seen over these last months, now we're coming out of the summer, is NYPD has been really strong and assertive, most gun arrests in 25 years, presence where we need it most, precision policing. This will not change that one bit. But again, we will use overtime in part to help defray the impact and make sure that we have officers where we need them whenever we need them. Go ahead, Peter.
Teachers union has concerns about the school quarantine plan. You've got young kids, non-vaccinated, maybe not great at wearing masks. The weather gets colder, they spend more time inside. Is this a recipe for a potential surge in the schools?
Well, our health leadership doesn't think that, and I'll turn to Dr. Katz and Dr. Choksi, who are part of this discussion. I know Dr. Katz is on. I don't know if Dr. Choksi is on. Yes, he is. Okay. We've had this discussion now over days and weeks trying to figure out the right balance, Peter, and we came to the conclusion that we have to combine two imperatives. Health and safety, of course, first, but maximum attendance by kids in school, which is also a health matter. And this is something we have heard from medical leadership all over the nation. Getting our kids back in school is about their health and well-being, keeping them in school unless there is a specific reason to have them out. So that's how we struck the balance. Dr. Katz and then Dr. Choksi, you want to speak to that?
Yes, sir. The American Academy of Pediatrics is very clear that children belong in school. I feel very comfortable with the protocols we have for both testing and contact tracing when necessary for keeping kids safe throughout our schools. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Choksi.
Yes, I agree. We do have this dual mission, keeping kids safe and also keeping kids in school, learning in person as much as is possible. And that's the root, of the health and safety protocols that we've described, which do use the layered approach to prevention, not just testing, but also the isolation and quarantine policies, but also masking, distancing, ventilation, and also the most important layer of safety, which is vaccination. And it's no coincidence that the changes that we're putting into place occur concomitant with the mandate for all adults in school buildings to be vaccinated, because that is such an important part of keeping our kids safe.
Amen. Go ahead.
Next, we have Dana from the New York Times.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I had a question first about the pledge for the city's operations to be completely reliant on renewable energy by 2025. Does that encompass the city's vehicle fleet too? Because obviously it has a lot of gas-powered and hybrid vehicles.
Excellent question, and I want to make sure I use the word exactly right. Electricity, all city government used electricity by 2025, but you make a great point that connects to our growing use of electric vehicles as well. Ben Furness, could you help Dana with the exact answer to that question?
Sure, absolutely. Good morning, Dana. So the pledge we were talking about today is to get 100% of our electricity from clean and renewable sources of energy, but we also have parallel goals to have an entirely electric vehicle fleet by 2040, and with our school buses leading the way in 2035. And obviously, as all of our vehicles shift to electricity, that electricity load will grow, but we're going to be getting it from clean and renewable sources.
So, Ben, I'm just going to hone to give an assist here, I hope, to Dana.
Sure.
The electric vehicles we have now that are city vehicles will be fueled with the electricity the city acquires. By 2025, that will all be renewable electricity going into those city vehicles. Is that fair?
That's exactly right, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And
Go
Dana,
ahead.
we can follow up and clarify anything else.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Dana.
Thank you. That's helpful. And then on another note, will you be releasing any numbers on the success of a return to office plan? Like, is there an absentee rate you're keeping track of, or are you keeping track of the number of folks who have offered their resignations in response?
We'll happily update with anything we're hearing. I've got to say, I get updated, as you see with the various cards in front of me. We have so many dashboards and updates going all the time. I'm not hearing, Dana, a problem. Certainly, we heard a couple of resignations, but nothing substantial. I'm not hearing any problems with absenteeism, but we'll certainly double check. And if there's anything notable, be happy to share with you. What I'm hearing is that the offices, vast majority of people understand their work is crucial to the people in New York City, especially at a comeback moment like this. And going back to what they were doing before is natural, obviously, to people, and it's helping us do the work. But any other details we'll definitely share with you.
Next, we have Paul from the Staten Island Advance.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Mayor. How you doing?
Good, Paul. How you been?
I'm well, sir. Thank you. Regarding the Rikers Island situation and, the criticism of the courts, there's been a high proportion of resolved cases on Staten Island. So I'm hoping to get a sense of, are there specific boroughs that are having challenges, and how do you hope to solve those?
I can't give you any breakout by borough, Paul, but I can tell you the solution, I think, is pretty universal. We need, right now we're asking the court system to immediately calendar 500 of cases of folks who have been in Rikers awaiting trial, in many cases for more than a year. That very act of starting the process in all those cases is going to help move things. We just, again, if we could just get some normalcy going in the court system so that trials were scheduled where there's going to be plea bargains that resolve cases, that immediately moves people out if they're going out of the city system, or clarifies how long they're going to be there. Anything that resolves either someone going free or someone going to state prison changes numbers. We believe with the actions that we're taking, the actions the state has taken, we can deeply reduce the number of people in Rikers over the next few months. But the court system, the faster the court system moves, the better we'll be able to do that. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you so much for that. And regarding the climate initiatives, obviously there is a little over a month and a half left in this year's hurricane season, and most of these projects are fairly long term. So I guess my question is, what can be done in the immediate future to protect people as we see these rising climate changes?
It's a great question, Paul. I think we got to separate the physical actions we can take from the sort of strategic actions, if you will. Physically, in some cases, we certainly learned from this horrible situation with Ida, some places that had a vulnerability to massive rainfall. Again, this was the most rainfall we've ever seen in our history. There's some things physically we could do to at least improve the situation in the short term. Not the bigger solutions. That's going to take a while, I agree with you, but there's certain things we could do physically. As simple as sandbags and putting out different structures to try and train water in a different direction. That could help in some very specific areas that were hit hard. But really, we need the much bigger solutions. So what we have at our disposal now is what I would say is the strategic approach, which is to get the best possible information and then go beyond it in terms of projecting to the people of the city if there is a danger, preparing people for the potential of evacuation in some of the vulnerable areas, moving our first responders into play to do direct evacuation if needed, working with community groups to educate and prepare people, things like travel bans to keep people out of those dangerous situations in their cars on the road, where there's flooding. I think we can do a lot in the short term, but the bigger work, yes, you're right, that will take years to come to fruition. So we'll use any tool at our disposal in the meantime.
Next, we have Ariama from New York Amsterdam News.
Hello?
Ariama?
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Ariama, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry about that. A little bit of a delay. Good morning. Well, almost afternoon now.
How are you doing today?
I'm okay. I'm working on a bit of a Rikers update. I know you talked about it a little bit previously, so I'm just wondering if you could talk again, just explain a little bit about what's going on with the COVID situation for me.
I'll turn to Dr. Katz, and he can give an update on the latest information we have and what we're specifically doing about it. Dr. Katz, related to COVID on Rikers. Dr. Katz, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So the major step that we've taken on Rikers is to open up a new intake area. The old intake area where we were using was not sufficiently large to ensure social distancing and to make sure that we were not cohorting together people who might spread COVID. So I do have the numbers. The current 7-day average at Rikers is 5.17, is still higher than what the community is, which is what I want to see it go down to what the general community is. And we believe that with the new efforts that will happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ariama.
Second question, as to the individual who died recently, I know it officially says he died of natural causes. Is there any update as to if that is related to COVID at all, or what's the medical situation there?
Yeah, and I'll turn to Dr. Katz, and I'll say two things. I know it's being investigated, Ariama, and obviously there are some confidentiality issues we need to be sensitive about. But Dr. Katz, whatever you are at liberty to say, please share with us.
Yes, thank you, sir. While I cannot discuss the individual circumstances, if we had, because there were a large number of people involved in the care of this patient, if we had believed that it was COVID, we would have had to have done contact tracing and isolation of a large number of people, which we have not done. So I think that gives the answer without saying anything about the person's own health.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, as more information is available for the investigation and we can say it in the appropriate way, we'll be sharing that. Go ahead.
We have time for two more today. The next question goes to Elizabeth from Gothamist WNYC.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. Yesterday, a group of residents in Jamaica, Queens, and along with 2 citizen advocacy groups filed a lawsuit against a trio of waste management companies, Royal Waste, Regal Garbage, American Recycling. They've been written about before. Basically, the residents are complaining about having to endure poor air quality, noxious smells. My question is, in 2021, my understanding is that this was a grandfathered in use, but in 2021, why isn't the city or government able to intervene in any way to protect these residents? Their use buttresses a park where, just a few weeks ago, Naomi Osaka came to play because she grew up in the neighborhood. So just kind of wondering why the government isn't in any way able to step in this situation.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, I'm glad you're raising it. I want to ask you just a clarifying question. Are you saying it's a facility or a set of facilities, and the lawsuit is about the facility's impact on the surrounding residential area?
Right. They're being sued for violating the Clean Water Act. But the suit is against those facilities, not again. It does not. The government is not named in the suit.
Yeah, I am not familiar with the situation. I'm glad you're raising it. I'm going to ask our team to follow up immediately and get you an update. I mean, if private companies are doing the wrong thing in terms of a local community, then of course the city wants to help the local community address it. But again, I would need to get briefed to be able to give you a better answer. So I will get briefed, but also we'll get the team to update you today if there's anything that we can do or are doing to support that local community. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
My second question is about the closure of PS 79. I know you and your health officials were asked about the details yesterday. I'm wondering if you can give the public some more details today about how the decision to close that school came about. I know in the past you've said that school closures would be done on a case-by-case basis. But since that one was the first, I'm wondering if, you can kind of give the public some understanding of how you plan to approach school closures. Like, what was the number of cases involved in that particular school that led you to decide that this school needs to be closed?
So let me give a quick frame on this. I will affirm the information I have right now. It's the only one of our 1,600 schools that has had a full closure, and that is, thank God, a good thing. I'm going to turn to Dr. Katz, Dr. Choksi, Chancellor Porter to see whoever wants to join in. But my frame for this, Elizabeth, which I think is important, is Test and Trace Corps and Situation Room are looking at each situation individually. There's not a perfect algorithm or chart. It really depends on the individual circumstances. Remember those twin imperatives that I feel strongly President Biden has enunciated, the CDC has enunciated, health and safety first, and maximum school attendance. So we're always trying to figure out where that balance point is, and it has to be done looking at all the facts, whether there's a way to keep a certain number of people in school while keeping them safe, or whether a fuller closure is needed. In terms of how to think about that, sort of the rules of the road, if you will, Dr. Katz, Dr. Choksi, Chancellor, anyone jump in that order?
Yes, sir. I think you've covered it. We are making individual decisions, always with the best interest of the children in mind. We look at the number of cases. We look at what the circumstances were in terms of whether or not there was mask wearing, whether or not the children were able to stay apart. And based on that, we make a decision as to what to do with the school. Thank you.
Dr. Choksi, you want to add?
Yes, sir. Just to elaborate, the criteria that we use to determine what we call widespread transmission in a school is what determines when that high threshold is met for school closure. And that's evidence of multiple sources of infection in multiple spaces or cohorts within a school. When we're finding preliminary evidence of this, an investigation occurs by our disease detectives. And based on their determination, if there is a reasonably high likelihood that ongoing transmission is occurring within the school, as opposed to, in a home setting or the community setting, that's what warrants the school closure. So it is a combination of quantitative criteria where we look at, of course, the number of cases, but also compare that to the overall size of the school population, but also some shoe leather epidemiology to figure out where the actual sources of infection are. And it's bringing those things together into an assessment to determine when that high threshold for school closure is met.
Today's phrase is shoe leather epidemiology. Very, very clever. Chancellor, anything you want to add? Chancellor.
Yep.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Yeah, so I'll just add really briefly that I think one of the things that's important is to get our folks vaccinated. That's why we're doing this. The case started from an unvaccinated adult and spread across several adults in the building. The great thing is that our schools had already done the work of setting up Google Classrooms, being prepared to pivot to remote. And so learning is still happening, but it also really encourages this moment to continue our vaccine work across our system.
Amen. Go ahead.
Our last question for today goes to Jillian from WBAI.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, last as usual.
Oh, but Jillian, welcome back. How have you been?
Thank you. Thank you. I've been well. Thank you. I tried unsuccessfully to take some time off.
Well, I know the feeling.
How are you doing? Yeah, I bet you do. I bet you do. So my first question is that I received an email from a listener of our show, Living for the City, who reported while she was riding an Uptown A train in Inwood, and I could get more specific with, the time, place, all that stuff, that there were 3 people sitting on the train across from her, either not wearing masks or wearing them improperly. There were 2 police officers who were on the train as well, but they just kind of stood there. Eventually, she went up to the cops, whose own masks weren't fitted properly, and they readjusted when they when she came to talk with them. And she said that the officers actually told her they were instructed from downtown not to approach maskless people unless they are interacting with others. So what exactly are the mask rules for the police regarding enforcement and also for interacting with the public, especially following the August mask directive?
Well, thank you for the question. And I'm going to tell you what I know, and then if there's any area we need follow-up, we'll get it for you. Clearly, officers who are indoor spaces or in any mandated space should be wearing masks, a mandated space like mass transit. If an officer is fully vaccinated and is outdoors, obviously it depends on the context, like for all of us. But no, the instruction is very clear to officers to have masks on in transit. Equally, if a member of the community raises a concern, neighborhood policing says respond to the concern. So letting someone know it's important to have a mask on and providing a mask whenever possible is always the optimal situation. We are not obviously trying to get the NYPD into any kind of detailed mask enforcement. That's not something we focus on, but educating people, reminding people, giving them a mask, those are the right things to do. I will follow up with the NYPD to make sure that those instructions are clear, or if there's anything else that they want to add about the approach they're taking, we'll get that to you.
Thanks. I appreciate it. So we've discussed preservation and landmarking a lot, and I wanted to know about the Landmarks Commission's decision to deny designation of the 19th century Grand Prospect Hall, which is a building currently on the National Register of Historic Places. And I don't know if you're going to remember this, which was the site for a Brooklyn Women for Dinkins fundraiser in 1993.
You have a good memory, my friend.
I have a scary memory. It's a blessing and a curse, let me tell you. So this decision came despite the fact that you said you supported saving the facade, and on August 30th you said I'm going to see what city can do to make that happen, despite the mayor appoints all the commissioners, and that the decision essentially is a guarantee to destroy GPH, which because there's a pending DOB application for full demolition is the word. Meanwhile, LPC has been accused of generally violating statutory mandates and abusing its power. So do you support LPC's action on the hall? And with the many related controversies during your tenure, what do you consider is the point of having historic districts with current development threats like the ones to BAM, Soho, and NoHo?
Well, look, you ask often and fairly very big, thoughtful questions. I would clarify. I think if you take the scorecard of the last 8 years, how much new preservation has been done, how many designations, I think it's pretty striking and very positive. So I'm really comfortable that Landmarks Preservation, this is what I wanted to see from them, has gone out and identified a lot of buildings and areas that needed to be preserved. Let's put that into play. I am not, and for a long time I've been very open about this, I'm not such a purist as to believe that everything needs to be preserved, and I think there has to be some flexibility even when something is preserved. But I just not sure I agree with the analysis overall, because I think they have done a good job of striking that balance. Now, on Grand Prospect Hall, this one pains me altogether. And honestly, this is totally a victim of COVID. I believe if this same exact situation had happened outside of COVID, we all would have seen it immediately and tried to stop it. I did not know that the family that owned it for so long and was part of the community, I knew them a little, and every one of us in that part of Brooklyn went to Grand Prospect Hall for something. You know, it shocked me that the family sold it, and it further shocked me that the interior was not preserved or protected. I've been talking to our team about seeing could we get the facade protected as part of whatever new development. I think that would be valuable. I don't think bluntly it's as valuable necessarily as saving the interior, which is already lost. But I need to get an update because what you're saying, I'm not sure is everything to the story. I want to make sure if there's anything we can still do or support to make sure that facade is saved, we should. But I am also fearful that the real chance to have done this the right way would have been at the very beginning, and none of us saw it in time because it was at the height of COVID and our attention was elsewhere. Well, with that, everyone, look, it's a reminder that we're coming out of COVID. We really are. And the numbers are so extraordinary in this city, and they bear reminding that we've now gotten almost 81% of adults in the city have received at least one dose of the vaccine. That is breathtaking, and that's something New Yorkers should be proud of. We're going to keep that effort going forward. Every single New Yorker who gets vaccinated helps us leave the COVID era behind. So everyone's a part of the solution. We need you so we can turn the page once and for all. Thank you, everybody.